Here are the three biggest lessons that we've learned through the first 6 weeks of the 2025 NFL season.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Michael Fabiano. And on today's show, we're talking about the biggest lessons that we've learned through the first 6 weeks of the 2025 NFL season. And a lot of these are big picture things to remember in future fantasy and dynasty seasons. So Fabs, why don't you kick us off? What's the number one thing that you've learned this year?
Well, one of them is certainly to avoid listening to and jumping on the bandwagon of preseason hype. And TreVeyon Henderson is the poster child for that. He looked great in the preseason. Amazing. He hadn't started a game this year yet, and he's still behind Rhamondre Stevenson in snaps, touches, fantasy points. And, Stevenson's lost 3 fumbles this year. So there's been adequate opportunities for Henderson to earn more work under Mike Vrabel, and it hasn't happened. And, we talk about maybe something Vrabel sees in practice, pass protection issues, whatever the case may be. Henderson has not been able to usurp a veteran who has turned the ball over 3 times and has not been relatively productive either. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. This year, unless something drastic happens, we're not going to get a TreVeyon Henderson who is startable in fantasy with any kind of confidence. Sans Stevenson going down with some sort of injury. Long term, of course, you like the talent, but the beginning stages of his NFL career have been very, very disappointing, to the point where now he's a bench piece, and really no more than that. At most, he is a bye-week flex replacement, and not a good one at that.
So I generally agree with you. And we've been talking about this for a few months now. Like, I just don't get worked up about like guys that have been having huge training camps and preseasons, because more often than not, it doesn't translate. But what does translate is how these guys are being used in preseason. Like, I'll give you an example. Tyler Warren played with the first team offense only in preseason. He got a ton of work with the first team offense. And we weren't, honestly, I remember talking about this the day after Daniel Jones got to start. It's like, hey, if Daniel Jones is the quarterback, Tyler Warren is going to be a fantasy superstar, because he's just going to get so many targets in this offense. And that's been the case. Or you look at someone like Caleb Johnson for the Steelers, who in the preseason was playing with the, third offense primarily. Like, it was Jalen Warren and Kenny Gainwell both getting opportunities. We didn't see Caleb Johnson until like the third and fourth quarter of these preseason games. Fast forward to week 6 of the NFL season, and he's hardly playing at all. That to me matters more than, oh, this guy looked really good or this guy looked really bad.
Yeah, that's definitely important. And I was talking to a buddy of mine who used to be a Major League Baseball pitcher yesterday, and we were just discussing this kind of stuff because he has TreVeyon Henderson. And he said, this is not just football. It's baseball too. It's other sports. He gave me an example of Greg Bird, who used to play for the Yankees, and he had this amazing spring training and everyone was very high on him. And then when the regular season came about, he did nothing. No. And, there's always examples of that. So what you're pointing out is very important. Usage in the preseason. If a guy pops a few times with the second and third team offense, okay, who cares? If a guy returns a kick 100 yards for a touchdown in the preseason, who cares? Where is he being utilized? What is the head coach and the offensive coordinator doing to put him in a position to gain a rapport with a quarterback, like you mentioned, Daniel Jones and Tyler Warren? Those are the things you need to be looking at. These big pop plays. And listen, fantasy football analysts, and sometimes I'm guilty of this too, not all the time. I have no shares of TreVeyon Henderson, none. Not in redraft. And in Dynasty, I didn't end up getting him at all because of where I was picking. But you have to sometimes zig when everyone else is zagging, and not drafting Henderson early right now has been the right decision. Now, maybe that won't be the case moving forward if we're talking about Dynasty, of course, long-term. Marcus, I think we both agree we like him still long-term. But right now, he's unstartable.
It's just a good reminder to not overreact too much based on what you see in preseason. If you're dramatically moving a guy up because of one or two plays in the preseason, that's likely going to be a mistake. But if you are moving a guy up because, okay, he played 9 snaps, they were only with the first team offense. I'll give you a good example of this. Harold Fannin Jr. was somebody in the preseason who only played with the first team offense. I don't even think played in the first preseason game because he was a starter, a quote unquote starter that they didn't want to put out there for injury. And now we're seeing, 6 weeks into the season, he's really the de facto number 1 tight end on this offense. He didn't get a lot of work in the preseason as a receiver. He didn't put up big numbers, but because he was being listed as a starter, and it kind of explains why. That to me matters more than a guy catching 7 passes for 60 yards.
Another player I think that will fall into this category, not as bad as Henderson though, is Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. So he had seen his value rise because of hype. Okay. I mean, he was getting hyped, not as much as Henderson, but he was getting a lot of hype. And then they trade Brian Robinson and Ja'Cory's value goes up. And now, yes, he's the top back in Washington. He wasn't very good this past Monday night. He had one good game all year, but it took Austin Eckler getting hurt for him to actually take over and be like the lead back. So I like the usage that I'm getting from Krosky-Merritt in the last couple of weeks. I mean, he was the clear number 1 against Chicago, and I love him against Dallas this week. But
why wouldn't you?
I get exactly. If it was Chris Rodriguez, I'd probably love him against Dallas too. But through 6 weeks, you've had one good game. One, that's it. I mean, you had that 2 touchdown game against the Chargers. That was it. Even against the Bears, who were giving up 6 yards a carry, he didn't do anything, and he fumbled. Weather conditions were not great. But after 6 weeks, you would have thought, Marcus, that Bill would have been better. And it wouldn't have taken an Austin Eckler injury for him to take grasp of that starting role. And until he starts to show signs of consistency, we can't really say that he's been worth the hype. He's getting the touches, which is great, the last couple of weeks. But we've got to see some production from a fantasy standpoint. I think we will see it against Dallas. But that's another player, too. Got moved way up. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, look at the situation in terms of, his draft stock, etc. We all know the stories, but now look at him. He's in a position to put up great numbers and be the starter. He's the starter now. It took some things to happen, but the numbers haven't been great just yet.
And I want to dive into this a little bit more because there were a lot of day 3 running backs from this class that we were really excited about coming into the year. And we're not saying, we're not putting dirt on their grave already, but those guys haven't necessarily helped you win very many fantasy games so far. Let's dive into that more next.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Why do I love FanDuel? Well, it's simple. They allow me to bet however I like. Like, one of my favorite things is getting up on a Sunday morning, checking out all the odds and lines, and putting together a money line parlay. It gives you a chance to root for some different teams outside of your favorite team. Plus, I love being able to do some of the same game parlays. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. And whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are discussing some of our biggest takeaways and lessons that we've learned through the first 6 weeks of the NFL season. And I got to say, Fabs, like, we make this mistake every year. We always inflate rookies maybe a little bit too much to start the year. Now, there are a couple guys that do hit. I mean, Emeka Egbuka is somebody that hit right away. We're going to talk about him in a little bit. But for the most part, you got to be patient with these guys.
Especially the running backs, right? And when the NFL draft wrapped up, one of the themes that I remember thinking to myself was a lot of these running backs went into bad situations. You know, Henderson was hyped like crazy, but Rhamondre Stevenson is still in the prime of his career. And I remember saying that over and over again. I'm like, listen, he's not just going to magically take over for Stevenson. It's going to take some time. Even Mosher and Hampton, look at the first 2 weeks. He wasn't a featured back. Like, Najee Harris, before he blew out his Achilles, was getting some touches.
He was.
So it took Hampton some time. Remember, in the first couple of weeks, we were freaking out about Mosher and Hampton. And it took Najee Harris getting hurt for him to kind of take over. And now, unfortunately, he's hurt himself. RJ Harvey, same kind of thing, which I talked about. I says, J.K. Dobbins is going to be the starter there. J.K. Dobbins is a starter, and J.K. Dobbins has looked great. And RJ Harvey is the guy that people drafted ahead of J.K. Dobbins, obviously in Dynasty for obvious reasons. But the immediate gratification, not there. From a fantasy standpoint, Caleb Johnson, same kind of thing. Jalen Warren, when he signed that extension, I think Marcus and I were both like, okay, well, that hurts his value. When we heard about the pass protection problems, that hurts his value. Kenneth Gainwell's ahead of him on the depth chart. That's a big problem. And then when he had that gaff in that one game early in the season, we have issues here with Caleb Johnson. And he's a player that I'm worried that he might not ever get a chance to be a true featured back in Pittsburgh, especially because Warren's on a couple of a new deal where he's extended for a few years, and Kenneth Gainwell's played well. And so, the same thing with like a Matthew Golden, who you and I both agreed we did not like him as an alpha type wide receiver out of the draft. He was a first round pick. Right now, the best Packers wide receiver in fantasy is Romeo Doubs.
By a lot.
Veteran. Right. Yeah. And Golden was top here.
And real quick, think about what has happened already with this Green Bay wide receiver room, where you've had Jayden Reed, who got hurt in week 2. Christian Watson is obviously out. Now, that's partly why they drafted Matthew Golden, but he just signed an extension. Right. And Matthew Golden is getting a lot of snaps with the first team offense, and he's making some plays, but he's not somebody that you feel great about putting in your starting lineup right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of these players are bench players right now. Outside of Hampton, when he comes back, certainly he'll be a starter. But Henderson's a bench player. Harvey's a bench player. Johnson's a bench player. Golden's a bench player. And Colston Loveland's a bench player. And Colston Loveland, that's another player. What was the theme when he got drafted? He's the next Sam Laporta. Why? Because he's in Ben Johnson's offense. Well, guess what? Cole Kmet's a damn good tight end. Maybe not from a fantasy perspective, but he's a good player. And he hasn't relinquished that starting job. And Loveland might not take that job for the rest of the season. It might take a year before Loveland makes an impact. And who knows if he's ever going to be the next Sam Laporta, which most people were hoping and projecting that he would be. So youth doesn't always matter. I think that is the big lesson that fantasy managers have to learn. If there is a veteran in his prime ahead of him on the depth chart, don't always assume that youth will win out. And this year has been a perfect situation, a group of examples that play right to that sort of theme, Marcus.
Yeah, and I look at the running back class from this year, and you went through a lot of the names, but we believe this is one of the deeper running back classes in NFL history, or at least after the last 20 years or so. And it still could be. I don't want to poo-poo this class at all. I think it's just a reminder of it takes these guys a while. Your top guys, your Ashton Genty, your Hampton, your Judkins, those are, 2 first-round picks, and I think, the 36th overall pick. Like, we expect those guys to come in and play right away, and they have played well, right? You mentioned the Hampton stuff. But if you look at from pick 75, which is like the middle of the 3rd round and beyond, I mean, there's been one running back in that group that's hit, and we had 20 of them drafted, and it's Cam Scatterbo. Like, that's the only one between Woody Marks and Caleb Johnson, Dylan Sampson, Ollie Gord, Rashard Smith, DJ Giddens, Jaden Blue, Jarquez Hunter, Trevor Etienne, Devin Neal, Quint Allen, Phil Maffa, Jordan James. I mean, I can keep going. There's just a bunch of those guys, and the only one that has been valuable from a fantasy standpoint is Scatterbo. There's going to be others that hit. I just want to preface it. There's going to be others in that group that end up becoming good fantasy assets. But you cannot rely on those guys in the first, 2 months, 3 months of the season to really help you at all.
And some of those players are going to fit right into that category that I mentioned. We've got players who went to teams that already had established veterans. The Giants did not. I would not call Tyrone Tracy established. He had a decent rookie year. And so, when you watch the tape on Scatterbo, and I love him because I love the old school mentality that he has, I thought there was a good chance that he could usurp Tracy. And certainly we've seen that. In the case with Cleveland, who was there that was going to take touches away from the player who was the 2nd pick in the 2nd round?
Yeah, pick, I think, yeah.
No, but Jerome Ford? No. Nick Chubb was gone. So opportunity and talent. And by the way, don't get freaked about Judkins having a bad game last week. He's going to smoke Miami this weekend. I can promise you that.
One more thing before we move on. We're telling you not to be over-reliant on youth early in the fantasy season. But I do think there are times when these guys pop so quickly that you need to be flexible, right? We're always telling you not to overreact to one game, but sometimes that first game can tell us so much. And I think the perfect example of that is Emeka Egbuka, who caught 4 catches for 67 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 1. And that was with a healthy Mike Evans, right? And a lot of times these guys that end up becoming superstars or dynasty stars or top 10 receivers or whatever you want to say, they end up popping way earlier and faster than what you think. And I think Egbuka is one of those guys. So be open to dramatically changing players' values the first or second time that you see them, because more often than not, that's how it works.
And Egbuka is a situation where talent and a rapport with a quarterback really won out. But I would also say this. He hasn't played in a game with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin because everyone's been hurt. And I'm interested to see what happens when that scenario is a reality. I still think Egbuka is going to end up being the most targeted wide receiver in Tampa Bay. But I am interested to see how that sways things, if it does at all.
I don't think it's going to sway because I just think he's the best receiver on the team.
I agree.
Yeah. So it's like one of those things. We wait all off season for, any bits of news, or we wait for these guys to play. And sometimes once you see them on the field with their new team the first time, that ends up being what they become. And that's the case for Emeka Egbuka. So strong start there. Let's talk about your favorite thing, Babs, historical trends and why they matter. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Listen, there is nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your favorite NFL team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at the checkout. It's all incredibly frustrating. But that's why I use Game Time and Game Time only. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and it's backed by the Game Time guarantee. You will always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, So the price that you see is the price that you pay. I love how fast it is. It's cheaper and less stressful than any other way that I bought tickets before. Plus, I love that I can see exactly what my view is going to look like from my seats in the app before you buy. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go download Game Time today. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Podcast. 2 shows every single day, one in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Fabs, let's wrap this thing up with our last takeaway, which is historical trends. Why do they matter so much?
Because if you don't learn from history, you are, damned to repeat it. You have to go back and look at what players have done over the years that are in similar scenarios to players that we're drafting right now. And you go to school on that. And Saquon Barkley is the number one poster child for this. Barkley was one of the 2 best running backs in fantasy football last year, right up there with Jahmyr Gibbs. He had 355 points. You know how many points he's on pace for right now? 253.
Yeah.
He's on pace for 920 rushing yards. He had 2,005 last year. He's on pace for 1,300 scrimmage yards. He had over 2,200 last year. Folks, when a running back has that many touches, that many carries, is a 2,000-yard rusher, and is on the cover of the Madden game.
Oh, stop.
How many touches
did he have total, including the Super Bowl?
It was over 400.
Yeah, it was way over 400.
It takes a toll, unless you're Derrick Henry. And so Barkley he's on pace to be 100 points worse than he was last season, which is exactly the number that I mentioned is ballpark. That's what Eric Dickerson had seen. And that was the lowest in terms of declines from a 2,000-yard rusher in the following year. And it's not just Saquon, okay? And we're talking about historical trends, and we're also talking about beware the magical season. I'm going to stick with historical trends, though, okay? I'll give you another example. Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin is coming off a magical season, and then he held out. And Marcus, what happens a lot of times when a player holds out? Got hurt, and he hadn't barely played. And in the games that he's played, his catches per game are down, his yards per game are down, his fantasy points per game are down. In fact, his fantasy points per game are down almost by half. That's awful. So that's something that we also have to remember historically. When guys hold out, sometimes injuries happen and the decline in statistics also occurs. Again, I have a few others. I know you're going to 100% disagree with me on this one. 100%. This is a beware the magical season scenario. It's Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers had the most catches of any rookie in the history of the NFL last season. Most by, 2 or 4 he beat Malik Neighbors. He had 112. Guys, and Marcus is going to push back. I understand that. He's barely played this season. When he has played, his catches per game, down. His yards per game, significantly down. His points per game, significantly down. You bought Bowers on his ceiling season. And I'm not saying he's not going to be a great tight end for a long time, but this season, I got to be honest with you. I remember talking about Bowers in the preseason catching 80 passes. I think you remember that because you were pushing back on me on that one because he had 112 last season. You have to beware of the magical season and buying a player on his ceiling year. And I honestly don't know that Brock Bowers will ever have a better year than he did as a rookie.
He might not, right? There's a good chance he doesn't. But I think we need to put his in context. He's having a bad season because he got hurt. Like in week 1 against New England when he was fully healthy, 5 catches for 103 yards. And then he has this bone bruise that he's trying to play through. He has 4 catches for 38 yards, 5 catches for 38 yards, 5 for 46 against Chicago. And then he just wasn't the same player out there, so they're resting him. So I understand your point.
Injuries are all a part of it, though, brother.
They are, but I just think in his case, his numbers might have dropped just because he's not getting targeted as much, but they're dropping because of the injury. But there's also another historical trend I wanted to point out is the guys that are going to positively improve, right? An example of this would be like Jake Ferguson for the Cowboys. Last year, he had 86 targets and 0 touchdowns, right? And we know, like, historically, if you're getting that much work and that many targets, you're going to get it in the end zone. And what have we seen through the first 6 games of the season? 4 touchdowns already. So that's a good reminder of like, hey, if you're getting this much action, usually things are going to eventually bounce the right way for you. And the opposite can be true as well. We've seen guys have 60 targets and score 11 touchdowns, and we know that's just not repeatable. Something just to keep in mind when we're doing our dynasty rankings in the offseason.
And Jake Ferguson is the perfect example of a player who's probably going to fall under the category of beware the magical season in 2026. Some other players too. I mean, Jamar Chase, consensus #1 overall pick in redrafts, and certainly right there in dynasty startups. He's on pace for 316 points. That's almost 100 fewer than he had last year. And talk about the curse of the #1 overall pick. And, I love that kind of stuff.
He's been better the last couple of weeks, though. He's at least stabilized.
He's been better, but his pace is down. His pace is down. Yeah. And there's no way that he is bouncing back to the point where he was last season without Joe Burrow.
No.
And I want to talk about Brian Thomas Jr. I made the mistake. A lot of fantasy analysts made the mistake of not realizing that most of his success came with Mac Jones last year. And he was getting a lot of targets. He was really the only guy in Jacksonville. You bring in Travis Hunter, who hasn't made a huge impact as a wide receiver, but every lost target matters. Brendan Strange was the most consistent pass catcher before he got hurt. Donnie Brown's in the mix as well. But BTJ is on pace for fewer than 1,000 yards. He had 1,200, nearly 13 last year. He's on pace for 6 touchdowns. He had 10 last year. He's on pace for 200 points. He had 284 last year. And so it's hard to pick and choose. For example, like Malik Neighbors. I had no concerns about Malik Neighbors being great whatsoever. Why? Because he played great last year with 4 curtain jerker quarterbacks. Although Daniel Jones has looked better this season. We have to factor all that kind of stuff in. Chuba Hubbard's another guy. Came out of nowhere. Magical season. And this year, Rico Dowdle in 2 games has been head and shoulders better than Chuba Hubbard. And now you have to worry about Chuba in Dynasty. Because is he getting the job back? I don't know. And if he does, are we going 50-50 now? I could see that. So always remember that. Don't draft last year's best team. Bob Harris, who is the legendary king, of course, and our good friend, always says that. One of the few things that he has said that sticks with me. Everything else I try to just go in one ear and out the other. I'll make sure he'll listen to the podcast and he'll probably swear at me. But that was a very let's just say prophetic statement that he had once made. And that one sticks. Don't draft last year's best team. Quinshon Judkins is going to end up being a better fantasy running back than Saquon Barkley this season, folks. Crazy. Think about that.
Yeah. All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, we are free and available on all platforms. On Thursday's show, we're going to have Matt Williamson. He's been tied up with some Steeler duties because the Steelers play on Thursday Night Football this week. So be on the lookout for that show. Follow Fabs on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.